Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. Remember to subscribe to our free podcast so you won't miss any of our illuminating content. Here is episode 155.
Take shortcuts when it's necessary so that you maintain your own sanity, that you maintain good health, and a good attitude about where you are in your life.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Joanne Miller. Joanne is the author of Creating a Haven of Peace and the wife of Dan Miller of 48 Days to the Work You Love. Joanne believes that laying a foundation of respect and strong relationship is the key to creating a sanctuary in the home. Joanne gives simple steps in how to intentionally create the home atmosphere you desire. She's an artist, teacher, speaker, mother of 3, and grandmother of 15. And I might add, she's also the mother of a recent Firestarter guest, Ashley Logston, who was episode 151. Extremely inspiring. But we're so excited to have you join us, Joanne.
Well, I'm very excited to be here, Rebecca, and I hope that I can speak some great wisdom into your audience and be helpful along the way.
Yeah, talk about wonderful mentors. We are going to get an earful today. So I'm really excited to have us talk about creating a haven of peace in our homes. But before we get into any of that, please tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I've been married for 48 years, which is interesting because my husband's best-selling book was 48 Days to the Work You Love. And so we really celebrated big this year. He's a serial entrepreneur, so we have had quite a roller coaster ride of our life together, from having lots of things to having nothing and lost our home and everything. So I have a lot of stories to tell, a lot of adventures along the way. And my book is really a lot of that story, but also it's indicative of how you can have a haven of peace and a happy life in spite of your circumstances and your financial situation, etc. But I'm also an artist, and I teach art as well as do art. I paint and I draw and I make greeting cards and I write books, and all of this, Rebecca, has pretty much happened since I turned 50, which was a good number of years ago. So I am really in my old age and loving every minute of it.
How fun. That's awesome. I love to hear people that have been married forever. We're going to definitely get into some marriage topics and stuff, and then also the challenges that you've had, because I'm sure it hasn't been an easy 48 years.
You don't think so?
But I really love this excerpt in her book, and I wanted to read a portion of it, and maybe it can jumpstart us into this conversation of why you wrote this book. She goes, "On a trip to Chicago soon after our last child left home for college, my husband, Dan, made a statement revealing a truth that hit me like a sledgehammer. I love Chicago at Christmas. It's truly magical, but everything I saw, the twinkling lights, the carolers, the window treatments, the snow falling, found me exclaiming, 'Oh, I wish my kids were here to see this.' Finally, Dan asked, 'Can you enjoy anything without the kids? Can you enjoy it for us, for you?' I realized he was pointing out a very valid fact. I simply did not know how to enjoy my life without seeing it through the excitement of other people's lives. It was a pattern I had a hard time breaking and took a few years of introspection, counseling, reading, and concerted effort to discover who I truly was and how God had uniquely prepared me for the life I was to live." I think that can describe any woman at any part of their lives. I think a lot of us are definitely, we do everything for everyone else, and we get a lot of our joy and satisfaction from that. But I think what a wonderful way to start that out. So, give us kind of a background of what was the inspiration behind your book to write these wonderful words.
Well, the inspiration for the book really has been festering inside me for maybe festering isn't the best word, but incubating inside me for probably 30 years, because I have, I've always had that desire to break away from the family dysfunction that I grew up in and draw a line in the sand and do my life differently, live my life differently, stay married for one thing, because divorce was so rampant in my home. My mother was married and divorced 3 times. All of my aunts, my grandmother, everybody they were all divorced. It was just a bunch of women. And I had no brothers. I had sisters. So it was just all a matriarchy and very much a woman's world in my growing up. So I had a lot to learn. Drawing a line in the sand and making a difference in how I lived my life was very intentional. But the part to that leads to what you were talking about in the quotation that you did out of the book is that I put so much of me into that. It became my career, and I was happy for it to be my career. I loved being a career mother and supportive wife, and I did it really well. I also did it to the point where I feel that by the time I reached empty nest, which was about the time I turned 50, which just so your readers or your listeners know, that's been 17 years ago, I, at that point, wasn't sure what to do then, because I felt like I'd been fired from my job. My kids didn't need me in the way that they had before. They weren't even going to be at home. My last one was going off to college, so what was I going to do with myself? So I had to really work at reinventing myself, and that was at about the time when that situation happened in Chicago. My husband takes me there every year at Christmas time for my birthday, which is 3 days before Christmas, and it's a grand celebration for us, and I do believe that Chicago is just magical at Christmas time. I love it. It's my favorite big city. But it was so hard for me to go and not want to share it with my kids, because that's just what moms do, you know? You're always thinking, well, no, I don't need this pair of underpants. My kids need it worse, you know, when you're shopping. Or let's see, what would the kids like for dinner tonight if you're at the grocery? Or if you're on a vacation with your husband, you're thinking, oh, the kids would enjoy this too. That's just so normal. So it took me a while when he said that remark to me. It made me recognize that, wow, this is a new season of my life, and I need to learn to embrace it in a healthy way and not just hanging on to what was. One of the things being married to a serial entrepreneur, which I have been for so long, is that I need to be better about embracing change. I wanted to be better about embracing change, and that was one of the major changes that I had to look at. So yeah, it was a critical time. It's a pivotal point that I felt was worth putting into that book, because I think a lot of mothers deal with that.
Yeah. Well, and there's several components that we can go to. First of all, you know, with our home life, you talked about coming from a place where there's all matriarch, you know, type women. Mm-hmm. And in your book, you talk about putting a correct perspective on, you know, the leadership in the home. And I think that's kind of a controversial type topic anymore because of kind of a women's live. I mean, I think we all have the old picture of what it used to be like, of, you know, the man said and did everything and told you what to do. I mean, give us the proper perspective of how that relationship's supposed to look.
Well, that's an interesting question, because my husband was raised conservative Mennonite. His father was a conservative Mennonite pastor of a very small church in Ohio. And so he was certainly raised in an environment where women didn't have a whole lot of voice. And his mother was, I just think, an amazing woman. She became my dearest friend, and she's passed away a good number of years ago now. But she was doing a lot of trying to break out of that mold and to learn to fly on her own, and with her own intelligence, do more research and searching for her spiritual life, as well as just having a voice. And so I learned some from her, but I knew that in my home, my mother was kind of my God. I didn't know beyond that. I was not raised in a religious home at all, but a very puritanical home. And I looked to her as being my guide for everything. And I was a good kid and did pretty much what my mom said. I really became more of a surrogate spouse to her. I knew that when I got married, I did not want to emulate either home. I didn't want to emulate what Dan came from, nor did he, nor did I want to emulate what I saw. But I am very adamant about this one key element of having a healthy, happy, peaceful home, Rebecca, and that's the home needs to be governed by the parents. Now, that can be a single parent or it can be a couple, but they need to be on the same page and they need to be in charge. The children do not need to run and control the home. And I see that all too often. If there is a poor relationship, so often the children get by with so much more than what they should. They have so much more control, and they're so disruptive and disrespectful quite frequently that they don't respect the fact that there are parents who are the leaders, the guidance that they need, the role models, hopefully good role models that they need to emulate. And so they just take over, and the parents just lose themselves in the process. And they often lose one another. Yeah. I am very adamant that you work on your relationship first, and that's the foundation for the success and the security and the sense of love and belonging that our children just become successes in their own lives if they've seen this, if they see their parents together and in harmony. I think that's so critical, and we see that played out in lives where the children have been in control for far too long, and they grow up being very disrespectful of parents. And I hate to see that. It grieves me.
Yeah. I think you said another very almost controversial thing. I think a lot of us parents that are kind of parenting now, our kids are running our household, they're running us ragged in some instances. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're homeschooling. What do you feel like that marriage relationship? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what does that do to create that haven in your home if you can keep that marriage relationship strong? Let's kind of talk about a few of those things.
Well, we had a needlework that I had done many, many years ago, hanging on our wall all through the years of our kids growing up, that says the two best gifts we can give to our children is roots and wings. And those roots, I think, are greatly underestimated at times. If we have set a good foundation of a loving, harmonious home, and that parents are on the same page in raising the children, and that they love one another, and they show respect to one another, and politeness, and all of those common courtesies that sometimes we think just aren't all that important, but really are. If we see that between mother and father, then those children are going to emulate that. Typically, you're not going to find a bully, or you're not going to find someone who is terribly disrespectful and does a lot of backtalk if they haven't seen that in their parents. Yeah. Now, I also realize that there are an awful lot of single-parent homes these days, and I was raised in one, and I know that presents its own set of problems. And for the sake of this conversation, mostly I'm talking about homes where there are a father and a mother. And I am not opposed to that father being the one that's home with the children if the mother is more capable, or more capable of earning a living. I have no problem with that. I'm not so traditional that I don't embrace that, because I see that happening a lot these days, and that's okay. But somebody's got to be in charge. Rebecca, if there's not a leader somewhere there in the home that takes control and says, okay, I am in charge. We had a saying that our house was run by a benevolent dictatorship. It wasn't a democracy, because you could easily get outvoted by your kids if you have very many kids. So it was a benevolent dictatorship. We had firm guidelines, but we said yes to anything that wasn't harmful or violent or went totally against our principles and our value system. We had lots of fun. We had great relationships. And I can honestly say I have extremely respectful children, but they saw that from us as parents. And we treated them with just as much respect as they always treated us.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the challenges that you had along the way. And we already talked about, the difficulty that you had kind of with an entrepreneurial husband, trying to keep that marriage together. And then also, as a family life, there's always challenges. Let's talk about those and what you learned from them.
Well, one thing I certainly learned is that you can be happy in spite of your circumstances. You can be happy in spite of your bank account, which for us was sometimes in the negative. And I am sure that you have listeners that can relate to that, particularly if they are in an entrepreneurial setting. But I am the garage sale queen. It doesn't matter how much money I have or how much money I don't have. I can have a beautiful home simply by going to garage sales, estate sales, dumpster diving. I have done that many times. Goodwill, thrift stores, consignment stores, etc. I love the thrill of the hunt. And so I have a lovely home. And at this point, I can afford to go out and buy a lot of the things that I have here that I've gotten through consignment stores and paid very little. But I think that in some respects, for me anyway, it's a good stewardship of my resources by looking for things that, and it's an ecological thing too. I feel that we're reusing, it's like recycling. You know, what somebody throws away could be a treasure for somebody else. And I find some great finds. And I shop all year at garage sales and consignment stores for my children for Christmas and my grandchildren because I can find some great deals. My point is, Rebecca, we do not need to have lots of money in the bank and have all of our ducks in a row and everything perfect in our home in order to have a peaceful and happy existence. A haven of peace is a place where everybody is loved unconditionally, and it's a place of immunity, a sanctuary from all of the stressors out there that everybody faces every day, and we all face them in one form or another, and even our children. You know, we like to think that our children don't have stress in their lives, but they do. They have their own set of stressors. And knowing that you have a happy, loving, peaceful home to come to after a hard day at school or a hard day at work or just a hard day with a friend that maybe gave you a hard time, whatever it might be, that's so critically important to have that foundation, those roots from the home that you can then carry with you throughout the rest of your life.
I love that. Yeah, I think a lot of us are looking for, everything to be perfect, all the circumstances to be, right there, all the ducks in the row before we can be happy. Give us your overall paradigm change of how you feel like your paradigm changed over time and with experience.
The first thing that pops into my mind, and I suspect there will be a few of your listeners who will relate to this, I've become less judgmental. I've had such a paradigm shift in the fact that I used to think many years ago in my naivety that if you do everything right and you have the happy home and you lay everything in the way that it should be laid and you have this great foundation, that nothing's going to go wrong, that your children are going to grow up happily ever after, and so will you. And you know what? Life happens. And you have kids that get on drugs and alcohol because they're still trying to find out who they are. So they're experimenting in ways you never conceived of. And you have kids that dress in Gothic style and you're thinking, oh, my stars, what is happening next? And you have events happen with health issues and all kinds of things, or losing a business and losing your home and your cars and all of those things did happen to us. And I often have people ask me, well, if we do this or if we do that, we might lose our stuff. We might lose our home. And I always think, is that the worst that you think that can happen? And they usually do think that that's just horrible. How could we save face if this happens to us? How could we get back on top? I'm thinking, oh, Rebecca, there are so many more important things. Relationship trumps everything. And I do believe that relationship and health are two things that are not so easily replaced. Believe me, a house can be replaced and so can all your stuff. So it's important to know where your priorities are, what's most important, and look at it with a perspective that gives you a little bit more insight to everybody else's lives. We all have a story to tell, and some of them are horrendous. We all bring that to the table. We all have a certain amount of baggage. Some of us have trunk loads. So how are we going to use that to help build our lives and make it better? Or are we going to let those things define our lives and in that way then keep us down or keep us depressed or keep us ill or all kinds of things that can come into your life if you're continually looking towards the past and all the things that had happened or could happen, and not really looking towards your future and what can I do intentionally to make it better.
Yeah, we sacrifice a lot of those relationships for things, right? Or
Yes.
for that. Yeah. Well, and I've even heard people, they feel like if they're like a good Christian person, like things aren't, God is going to bless them. And of course he does. But even people that are religious or doing those type of things, they have their own, that's why we're here, right? To have challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Along that vein, Rebecca, I do believe that sometimes God saves us from ourselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes the things I think I need, or the path that I think I need to go, sometimes needs a little circuitous way around before I get to that goal, or that goal may change. And I find that, the older I get, and I'm 67 now, the older I get and look back on my life, I see how pieces to my puzzle of life fit together in ways I could have never orchestrated on my own. Had all of the ability to try to do that on my own, I would have really messed it up, and that things fit together in a way that I could have never predicted, and it's been much more exciting. Sometimes it's difficult when you're in the midst of chaos, but I find that usually there's something really exciting at the other end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I love that. Finding the joy in the chaos type of thing, I think, is quite a struggle. So, so let's talk about some more details of your book. In particular, we kind of touched on it already, but regaining that romance that we have with our spouse, I think that can definitely be a challenge of creating a haven of peace. What are some suggestions of doing that, being successful at it?
Well, we have a tendency sometimes in all of our busyness to forget the importance of relationship and the importance of just touching and taking time to look one another in the eyes and being honest. I'm working on a webinar right now with a friend who's a psychologist and a counselor, and she and I are working on a webinar on talking about the hard stuff. Because sometimes even in a good marriage, it's still difficult to talk about the hard stuff. But making the time for one another is a key ingredient, I believe, to making sure that once the children are gone and left and leaving home, that you still have some kind of a semblance of a relationship that you enjoy so that you don't feel totally lost. I am fortunate in that Dan and I really worked hard on our relationship. He was just as willing as I to do what was necessary to make sure that our relationship was key ingredient in our marriage. And we have had date nights ever since I can remember. Even when we couldn't afford them, the neighbor kids would come over and watch the kids for a little bit just so we could get out, if nothing else, for a walk together, whatever we could do, a dinner out or lunch out or something like that, to find time for one another. And I think that's very, very important. Another thing that we did a lot and still do to this day is playing games. We tend to take life so seriously sometimes that we forget to have fun. So we instilled we had date night, but then we also had family nights every week for a long time while the kids were growing up, where we would get together and we would talk about issues for the family, whatever was bothering somebody or what we need to discuss, all of the points of business kind of thing. And then we would play games together, and we'd have dinner together, and we'd play games, and we'd laugh, and we had great memories from that. Well, our family, all of 3 of our children and their families all do this still to this day. And Dan and I, even though a lot of evenings we're here by ourselves, we're sitting at the table eating supper over a game of Skip-Bo or another game of cards or something to that effect, so that we're still playing games. Gives you a chance to communicate and talk about your day, laugh, and creates great memories. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and there's a section in the book that talks about different points that you can do where you're actually working in harmony together to gain that closeness that you had when you were first married.
Yeah. Well, and I think the longer you are married, sometimes the authenticity of the conversations, you gain hopefully you're gaining a deeper love for somebody, and you don't want to say things that hurt their feelings. But at the same time, some of that stuff does need to be said, or else, it causes a wedge in your relationship.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Other than playing games. I love that, because I agree. Those are times once the TV's off and stuff like that, you can look each other in the eye and actually be able to talk, but do you have any other suggestions of maybe having those authentic conversations?
Well, yes. One of the things that comes to my mind is to make sure that you're finding common interests. Sometimes along the way, we get so involved in raising our kids, in educating our children, and doing all the things that we need to do to put food on the table and lead a practical, upstanding American life, that we forget, what are we really interested in? What do we do? What's a passion of ours that we might have even set on the shelf for many years because you didn't have time to incorporate it when you were doing all of those things that you were at when you were a career parent. And so I really encourage people to find some common interests. Dan and I have done things like taking ballroom dancing classes together. Now, it's not that we're going to go out and find a ballroom somewhere to do dancing very frequently, but it was, for one thing, I don't know when I've laughed so hard because it was really like the blind leading the blind, and we had great fun doing it. But taking a class together, going to, my husband is a car enthusiast, so we still to this day, and have all throughout our marriage, every so often if there's a car show around, we'll go to that, and we take the kids and we take the grandkids. But now we just go, just the two of us, quite frequently, and that's a fun thing that we can enjoy together. And it's about the only time I think ever that we have a hot dog, but it's just a fun excursion that we can do and enjoy common interests. We garden together. There's so many things, even if you're doing nothing more than sitting down and reading a book together, and seeing more and more couples these days reading books together and discussing them. And I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, that's a good way to open those authentic conversations.
It really is. You'll open up all kinds of conversations. I've done a marriage box is what I call it, but what it is just a fancy box where I have about 80 questions in there that I give to newlyweds, or sometimes people who are having an anniversary or something. It's just a gift that I made up. And it's questions that just aren't answered just by yes or no, but they're just open-ended questions that elicit a conversation. And sometimes with all the interruptions of children and child rearing and career, we forget how to have a good conversation. Yeah. So these are good conversation starters.
I really hope you're selling that, because I could use that.
I actually do. I don't have it up on my website right now, but I have just been making some changes on my website, so it will be up there again. They're a lot of fun and make great gifts, especially for wedding showers. I highly encourage people to do this kind of thing. It really gets a great response from the person who receives it, because, in fact, it's interesting, Rebecca, I often get responses from like if it's a newly married couple, I'll get a note from the parents of the couple because they think it's the most awesome thing ever.
It really is. Well, and I kind of wanted to add too, my mom, I always saw her like going to the hardware store with my dad, which, now has been a really good example to me, because I'm horrible about I have dishes to do, I have this to do. He's just running an errand. But one of the things that I noticed that when she did that, it did give them time to talk. And sometimes when they'd come home, they'd end up sitting in the car for, 15, 20 minutes until we went out there and what are you guys doing?
Exactly.
But even taking those, doing errands together, sometimes can be a help too. So.
It really can. Just take time to make time for one another and do things together. Dan and I have a place that we go to on date night every Friday night that's about an hour's drive from our house. Now, we have a zillion places right close by, but this particular place is kind of unique, and it has live music, and no two chairs are alike. I think it's very bohemian, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. But that hour gives us an hour there and an hour back to just recap our week, to really get into good conversation. We don't play the radio or listen to a podcast or anything like that. We talk about our week and our lives together, and it's the highlight of our week. We look forward to it every week.
Before we go on, let's listen to this message. Changing a paradigm takes some study, but like me, you're probably super busy. That's why we've teamed up with Audible. Go to our website, theluminousmind.net. Get a free month of Audible with 2 audiobooks, thousands of titles in exchange for only books that you absolutely love. You too can be learning on the go to keep that fire burning.
Complexity in nature. Art is born. 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 Art.
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Joanne Miller, who's helping us to create a haven of peace. Well, let's kind of touch on ways that we can really find ourselves and make time for ourselves. I think that's one of the struggles that I have as a mother with all my kids home is like, how do I make time to be that kind of person? I mean, that's, I think, one of my greatest fears is that my kids go away and all of a sudden I'm like, what do I do with my life?
Well, sometimes you may have a passion, an interest that you can incorporate your children, get them involved also. I am an artist, and I love to do very creative things. I learned early on when I took my son, who was having a lot of problems with the traditional education system. He was a square peg in a round hole, very, very creative, and given every label imaginable, ADD, dyslexic, bipolar, all kinds of things. So I took him out of school when he was in 6th grade. And I quickly realized that so much of what he loved about life was his creativity. And so I tapped into that in a way that I incorporated some kind of an art project with everything we did. I don't care if it was math or science or history or whatever it was, we had an art project with it. That kept his interest, and it made him excited about learning. And I think it's important to recognize that everything that we do with our children can be a learning experience. And if you have an interest in something that you want to continue, that you want to delve into more, get them interested too. Have them be a part of it. That's a great educational tool for them, and it's a good outlet for you. I now teach my grandchildren art classes and have just done a children's book, published a children's book with my 8-year-old granddaughter who did all the illustrations. She's been in my art class since she was 4 years old. So there's so many things that you can do. We don't have to, sometimes we get into this mindset where it's either this way or it's that way. There's a zillion things to do in between. Make it work for you. And if you're totally sleep deprived, take a nap when your kids take a nap. Believe me, the dishes will wait, and you can always do fast food for dinner if it's necessary. It will not kill you. It did not kill my kids, and honestly, it will not. You take shortcuts when it's necessary so that you maintain your own sanity, that you maintain good health, and a good attitude about where you are in your life. Some things may have to sit on the shelf for a while until your kids get a little older, they have a little more independence, or they leave the house, whatever. But recognize that life isn't just an A or B decision. There's so many options in between. Make it work for you and for your family. One size does not fit all in clothing or in families or in lifestyles. So make the lifestyle that fits you best, and don't let others judge you or even care about how they judge you in that. Make it work for you.
Yeah, or don't judge yourself. I'm keeping that sanity, like you said.
There's a lot of truth to that. You're exactly right. We're hardest on ourselves.
Yeah. I was always like, if I don't... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you have this sense of perfectionism and you've got to do everything perfect, you're just going to wear yourself into the ground.
Yeah.
And I long ago lost that.
Yeah, you do I was at the point of like, have a list of things that have to get done every time. And when they didn't get done, you just feel like a failure, but it's just my own list. My husband has to remind me that you're the only one who cares about this.
Exactly. And in the long run, that list will still be there when you have time for it. And I am giving myself permission to stray off my list more and more all the time. Yesterday, it was a good example of that. I started my Monday with a zillion different emails and interviews that I was setting up and things that I needed to do that I knew were important. Plus, I have company this week. We have people staying here in our home. And so I knew I had a lot to do.
Yeah.
But I got this real urge to paint. I hadn't done it in a while. I'm going to be in an art show and sale in October, and I'm not prepared. I have got to get things done for that. And I just had that sense of urgency that I just wanted to paint. I didn't want to do those things. I didn't want to do the shoulds and the obligatory things that I knew were waiting for me. I wanted to do something that I could really get excited about and work in my passion. So I went to my studio, and I sat there and I painted for about 3.5 hours. And it changed my whole attitude, changed my whole week, made me so inspired and excited, and it really made a difference in how my week is going to turn out. I keep thinking about it. That inspiration was just what I needed. And we need to listen to ourselves when those things are calling us. If it's a child that just needs specific attention, listen to those things. But if it's you that needs specific attention, listen to that too.
Yeah, I love that, because sometimes we do need something that lights us from the bottom and propels us forward.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Well, let's kind of talk about how we can gain control of our home. You discuss in your book, like, using your 5 senses. Am I correct? Like,
yes.
Adding those together. Okay. So you talk about using your 5 senses within your home to gain control. Give us an idea of what that looks like.
Well, interestingly, I didn't really necessarily set out to do that, Rebecca. I just realized at some point along the road, a long time, many years ago, that I was doing this, that I was incorporating, sight and sound and touch and taste and smell and all of those things into everything that I did around the home. And so I actually made, if you go on my website, joannefmiller.com, on the homepage there is a banner that you can click on, and you can get a little downloadable poster that's about it's called Create a Sense of Peace, and it will give you insight into ways that you can put your home in a fashion that is beautiful and loving and peaceful, with just simple little things to do. Just simple things like the way you decorate, or the way you cook, or the way you incorporate your decorating and your music and your TV viewing and all of those kinds of things. So it's little insights in different areas of the senses, the 5 senses, that can make your home that haven of peace like no other. And they're not expensive, and they're not difficult. They're very simple, but yet profound in what it accomplishes.
Well, and I think too, what I'm picturing in my mind is the nostalgia that you create for your family. Traditions that carry them on and bring them back after they leave the home, even.
Definitely. One of those, Rebecca, that I talk about is every day when my kids were in school, before I started homeschooling them, they would come home from school. I would time it just right so that I would bake cookies or homemade bread or something to that effect. And if you're not a cook, you can always get the kind that you cut into pieces from the grocery store, whatever works. But have those baking in the oven, or have just baked them when the kids come home. They come home and they're so excited to be there. You've got a great treat for them. The house smells great. They'll never smell chocolate chip cookies again when they're grown up and not think about those times that you did that for them when they came home.
That's great. And that's one way to curb that loneliness, is that they'll want to come back for the chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, you're right. You are so right.
I'm so horrible at that my kids have to actually bake their own goodies. I'm like, well, that is teaching them a skill. So maybe that's
that's true.
A bad thing.
Nothing wrong with that. But just the sights and the smells and the sounds that you have at home are things that you'd be surprised how just implementing a few little tools when they're young can trigger great memories when they get older, and that then you see them emulating those same things in their own homes with their own families.
And I think too, like, especially if you're a homeschooling parent, you're creating an environment where kids are going to just thrive intellectually. as well.
Yes.
So let's talk about maybe some of the habits that you have in your personal life that you feel are the most helpful for your success.
I think probably the biggest thing for me right now at this stage in my life is relearning how to play. We have a tendency to think that play is relegated mainly to children, and that once those children are grown and aren't sitting around playing with their dolls or their games or their various toys, that we don't need to do that anymore either. And so we take life so seriously that we forget to laugh. We forget to find fun things to do, to run and play like children, and to feel that freedom from obligatory things, from life, from career issues, from busyness, from demands on us, but learn to play. And the best way I do that is to get together with a bunch of women who are artistic and creative, and we just paint together or draw together or do collages together. And it's almost like it has become like a mastermind of creatives, and there's about a dozen of us in the core group. We get together every Wednesday here at our place, and we create together. We laugh and we talk very frequently about how we are learning to play all over again. We tend to sometimes just lose that sense of play along the way, and I think that that's what I do that keeps me a more balanced person, makes me more attractive to be around, I guess,
yeah.
and happier in my own life if I've learned to play along the way and not take everything so seriously, not take my life so seriously.
Yeah, sometimes when I see a extremely grouchy elderly person on the street, I wonder, like, what has happened for them? Were they always that way? Or, but I really think that keeping that sense of humor, I mean, you're just going to be the funnest grandma on the block.
Well, I think it's important for myself, too.
Mental health,
yeah, it really is. I am, first and foremost, I consider myself, at this point, a writer. That's my passion. That's what I enjoy doing the most, and I've written several books. But I think that anything that I do for fun, creatively, like painting or drawing or doing collage or working with teaching the children, grandchildren art classes, or being with all my creative friends, all of those things feed into that ability to be a better writer. But it also makes me a much more interesting person to be around.
Yeah. You keep learning, right? It's like lifelong learning.
Yeah, I know when I was very young and naive, I used to think that by the time I reached 60 years old, I was going to know everything. What else is there to learn? Let me tell you, there's a lot to learn, and I hope that I continue to be a lifelong learner until I die, because that is what makes life interesting, and it helps me to grow and to be a better person.
Yeah. So you talked about the book that you're creating with your granddaughter. Do you have any other, long-term goals that maybe you have, or things that you're doing in the future? And then how is that going to affect the legacy that you hope to leave?
Good question. I have been asked this quite a bit, and I did some real thinking about it, because here's the dichotomy here. I could easily go out on the road and really promote this book and speak and do conferences, especially women's conferences, and speak in churches and do all kinds of things. I have a platform to do that through my husband's 48 Days community and through the events that we have here. I could easily do that, Rebecca, but if I go out and do that in a way that it becomes more of a career for me, then I'm negating what I really write about, what I believe in, what I really am passionate about, and that is the home. Somebody's got to be in charge. And the home it's my haven also. It's what I do best. It's what I so love. And I feel that if I go out and do all the things that I could possibly do, then I'm creating a career separate from that, and I'm going to get away from my true love. So I intend to be very intentional about the things that I allow myself to do, the interviews that I do, and the book signings or speaking engagements. I will do some, but I'm not going to make a big career out of it, because that's not my goal. I want to get the message out, and I hope that it organically does, that it gets out there. but I'm not going to be one to all of a sudden start carrying my briefcase and go out there and now conquer the world as a career woman, aside from what I love right here in my home.
I think that
will,
makes you
however,
more
keep
authentic.
writing. Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I think that I have to be true to myself, and that's an important concept. But also, I have written already a couple more children's books that my granddaughter is extremely excited about illustrating. So I will continue to write, and I'll do projects like that. And that, for my grandchildren, that's part of their education. So I'll continue to do fun things like that. But hey, like I said, I'm 67 years old, and I'm going to make as much fun out of the rest of my life as I can.
You sound amazing. Well, and I feel so privileged that you let me have you for an hour of your time to be able to talk to our guests. Wow.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I'm very happy to do it. I think that this is an important message for mothers, particularly mothers who are putting so much into themselves with homeschooling their children and being a good educator for their children, because that's an important role. And I took it very seriously, and I loved homeschooling. I would do it again in a heartbeat, and all my kids are doing that with their kids, and that excites me. I think there's a lot of merit to it, and it's a great bonding and a family experience.
Well, and I'd love to have you back on to maybe talk about mentoring, to become a mentor, a good mentor for yourself, or things that you could do. It'd be amazing. But before we say goodbye, do you have any final parting words for our listeners? And then give us your contact information of how we can get in touch with you and download the poster and all of those things that we talked about earlier.
Sure. I think my message would primarily be around, my final words would be to continue to play, learn to play, don't take life so seriously. Whether you've got small children or grown children, don't stop that sense of play, that sense of wonder, that sense of excitement and inspiration, and go out and search for fairies with your children or your grandchildren, and just have fun. And recognize that our world is extremely serious and sometimes very violent and volatile. So having that sense of fun and play is a critical part to really having a good balance in your life. So I would really encourage your listeners to not forget that. As far as reaching me and personally, and also reading my blogs where I write about home and family and marriage and creativity, you can go to my website, which is Joanne with an E, Joanne, F as in Fairchild, Miller, JoanneFMiller.com. And my books and some of my artwork and my marriage boxes will be up there very soon. All of that is on that website, but I would love to hear from your listeners, and I would love to be able to speak with them personally, one-to-one. I like to hear what they have to say about their home and family, because I am continually learning all the time.
Great. Well, again, our contact information is JoanneFMiller.com, but we will be sure to link up all that information that we've discussed today on our website as well. But thank you so much, Joanne, for coming on and joining us and helping to light our minds on fire.
You are so welcome, Rebecca. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope that your listeners got a lot from it, and I'm happy to hear from them.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Joanne Miller, go to our show notes, theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and get our new monthly newsletter. Then check out the Services tab to see how we can continue to assist you, our fire starters. Also, to help us continue production of illuminating content, go to our sponsor tab at theluminousmind.net for more information on sponsorship and affiliate programs. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, and now Instagram. Get our free audio content by subscribing on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider these easy ways. Tell your friends about us, leave us a review, share our content, tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.